This is a Dynamite Network podcast.
Hi, and welcome to the Dynamic Duel podcast, a weekly show where we review superhero films and debate the superiority between Marvel and DC by comparing their characters in stat-based battle simulations. I'm Marvelous Joe.
And I'm his twin brother, Johnny DC.
And we are kicking off Spooky October. We've never called it Spooky October before now, but I'm just going to call it Spooky October because we're coming at you guys with non-stop Halloween-related duels and reviews all October long, culminating in what is sure to be a much anticipated episode for our fans on Halloween Day, October 31st. I don't want to give away the surprise just yet, but it's going to be awesome. This episode is also going to be awesome. We're going to find out who would win in a fight between Andrew Bennett from the comic book I, Vampire, which I think is like the Apple version of a regular vampire, against fucking Dracula. Like, who's this Andrew Bennett guy compared to Dracula? He's nobody, that's who.
You're going to learn today. Today.
All right.
I honestly can't wait for this matchup. I think it's going to be pretty cool.
No. Okay, every time you want to use the word cool for the month of October, just replace it with spooky. So say that again.
I'm looking forward to it. It's going to be spooky.
Before we find out who'd win in a fight between these two characters, guys, we're going to break down the latest comic book movie news to come out from the past week, including some threads from James Gunn confirming new DCU canon info.
And that's basically it. Kind of a slow news week, but we're hoping for more content as the writer's strike and hopefully the actor's strike soon become resolved.
As always, we list our segment times in our episode description, so feel free to check out the show notes if you want to skip ahead to a particular topic.
As our listeners may know, our duel simulator is so advanced that it's gained sentience, and has named itself the artificial life form for running extensive duels, just a rather very intelligent simulator 9000, or Alfred Jarvis 9000. He has a quick message for our listeners, so listen up.
Why, hello there. Do you love listening and chatting about Marvel and DC? Then become a part of the Dynamic Duel community on Patreon, where you can choose from 3 tiers. The Dynamic 2.0 tier lets you listen to this podcast without ads and gives you access to its Discord chat group, where you can chat with Johnny DC and Marvelous Joe. The Fantastic 4 tier gives you that and more with 2 bonus episodes each month, including bloopers and top 10 shows where Johnny and Joe count down your favourite Marvel and DC subjects. The X-Force tier makes you an executive producer of Dynamic Duel, where every month you help the host choose what to review and who to fight against each other. And finally, the Dynamite Podcast Network tier allows aspiring podcasters to create their own battle-focused show using this Monte Carlo simulator. Johnny and Joe will help you develop your show, provide graphic support and consultation, and get you simulation results to announce on your show. Pitch the twins your show via email at dynamicduelpodcast@gmail.com or by reaching out to them on social media. Check it out at patreon.com/dynamicduel. Pip pip cheerio.
Thanks, AJ9K, and thanks to everyone who supports the podcast, including our newest executive producer of the show, Andrew Shunk. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Andrew, please, if we're not, reach out to us and let us know because we're going to be saying your name a lot, especially at the end of every episode. So Andrew Shunk is our latest member of X-Force and is now part of helping Jonathan and I come up with the content for this podcast.
Also, I just want to point out that he's a DC loyalist, which makes him extra special.
Yeah, I'm not happy about it.
We're taking over.
But thanks to all of our patrons. And guys, be sure to tune into the Max Destruction podcast, which is part of the Dynamite Podcast Network, where Dustyn and Ken are dropping bonus episodes these couple of weeks where they rant about things that grind their gears. It should be funny. They're both hilarious dudes.
Also tune into Senjo World this Thursday to find out who would win between Yoko Kurama from Yu Yu Hakusho and Sesshomaru from Inuyasha.
Visit dynamicpodcasts.com or click the link in our show notes to listen to all the shows in the Dynamite Podcast Network. But with that out of the way,
quick to the No Prize. A No Prize is an award Marvel used to give out to fans. Our version, the Dynamic Duel No Prize, is a digital award we post on Instagram and in our email newsletter for the person that we feel gave the best answer to our question of the week.
Last week's question was, what has been the most underrated Marvel or DC TV show in your opinion, and why? And that was coming off of the final trailer for the last half of Doom Patrol Season 4, which Jonathan and I view as a highly underrated show. You guys reached out with your opinions. Let's go ahead and run down our honorable mentions, as well as the no prize winner.
Our first honorable mention goes to Travis Bailey, who said,
Travis Bailey, the other Travis Bailey. Shout out to my good twin. Marvel all day. Could have went with MODOK. Could have went with Lucky Man on Shudder. Check it out. But I'm going with Black Panther, the animated series. Limited run, like 6 episodes on BET. Had everything. You had X-Men, a young T'Challa meeting Storm, the fall of Wakanda. It's a beautiful show. Yeah, y'all should check it out.
Yeah, Travis Bailey was kind enough to let us know that we miscited one of the answers from last week that was actually given by Travis Herndon, and we said Travis Bailey. Sorry to Travis Herndon for that, but apparently you and Travis Bailey are now twins, and we will address you as such. But no, the Black Panther animated show that came out on BET was an adaptation of the first arc of the Black Panther series that was written by famous Hollywood writer and director Reginald Hudlin. It was essentially a motion comic. The animation wasn't quite that robust, but it was a fantastic story. You know, Reginald did so much for the lore of Wakanda and the character of Black Panther, a lot of which was actually used in the Black Panther movie, such as the contest between Wakandans over who gets to be the Black Panther. A lot of great stuff there.
Yeah, I'd never heard of this series before. I didn't know this existed, but it's really cool to hear how influential it was on the character.
Yeah, it's definitely a quintessential classic Black Panther arc.
Great answer, Travis. Our next honorable mention goes to Jacob Bell, who said,
Hey, what's up, guys? This is Jacob. I think the most underrated show that I have seen is probably Gotham. I think Gotham's a really good show. I don't know why it got all the hate. I think it's a fun idea, fun concept, and the lead, the guy who plays Jim Gordon is really good, and the kid who played Bruce Wayne is also really good. So, yeah, Gotham. I think it's great. I think it's a really good show.
Yeah, I guess you could consider Gotham underrated. It's kind of hard to justify that maybe, considering that it was a network show that I think was mostly popular, even though Jacob's right, it did get shit upon quite frequently on the internet. I didn't actually watch the entire series, but what I did see, I thought was fairly well done. Just seeing these iconic Batman villains in like their proto forms, like for the Penguin, for the Riddler, for the Joker, all these different characters. It was just exciting to see.
I don't know. I saw some episodes too, and the acting didn't look that great. Maybe for like the main characters, but I mean, it's the CW, so it's a step up from soap opera acting, right?
This wasn't CW. This was Fox.
What?
Yeah.
Oh, total mind blow. Statement still applies. It was a WB produced show, so, you know.
I don't know. I mean, I guess you could say some of the characters got kind of hammy, but it's not like it was fucking the 60s Batman series or anything like that. It was decent. Production value was good.
Thanks, Jacob Bell, for the answer. Our final honorable mention goes to Peter Troll, who said,
Hey guys, it's Peter Troll. I just want to say that the most underrated Marvel TV show might have to be Spider-Man, the new animated series. It gets so much hate because of how goofy it looks, but if you can get past the way it looks, it's got a great story, and it rides the coattails of the Sam Raimi trilogy, and it's just got a lot of great details and stuff that were made for adults, and it's just a good watch overall, and deserves to be watched more often. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, thanks, Peter Troll. The Spider-Man, the new animated series, is an often overlooked animated series because it only had one season. It ran in the summer of 2003, which is actually in between the first Sam Raimi Spider-Man movie and Spider-Man 2. And it kind of branched off from the story of the first film in its own, like, alternate universe type situation, is how it could be perceived today, because it definitely doesn't lead into the events of Spider-Man 2. But it was cool for its time. You know, it was on MTV. Jonathan and I definitely watched this as kids. You know, it may date us. The fact that we watched the shit out of the show as it came out.
Yeah, I liked Neil Patrick Harris in the role. I thought the show was cool.
Yeah, and it had pretty interesting takes on characters like the Lizard. And I remember Michael Clark Duncan did the voice for the Kingpin.
Right.
And he had just got off of his role as the Kingpin in the 2003 Daredevil movie starring Ben Affleck. So it almost felt like a crossover, like a bridge between the Spider-Man movies and the Daredevil film, which was pretty cool.
Yeah, it was like a cinematic universe before a cinematic universe was a thing.
You're right, exactly. I bet you if I were to revisit this show now, though, it would look horrible.
Probably.
I remember the animation being pretty stiff back in the day, so it would look extra weird now.
But great answer, Peter. We want to give a quick shout out to Scott Camacho and Mitchell Smoothie for taking the time to visit our website and record an answer. But the winner of this week's No Prize is Eric Jones, who said,
What up, what up, what up? It's Eric Jones, and I think the most underrated DC and Marvel TV show is The Big Green Hero, and I'm not talking about Arrow, I'm talking about M. effing Swamp Thing. The show had everything that I think you could want in a Swamp Thing-based material show. It had horror, comic book action. It had different heroes from the Justice League Dark. It's set up perfectly for a season 2 and or a Justice League Dark show, and it got taken away from us way too soon. Swamp Thing's the way.
the Swamp Thing show is so damn good. It did not deserve to be canceled the way it was before the first season even wrapped its final episode. It was done so dirty for as good as it was. Not only were the special effects really good, but just like the horror elements that they introduced and the writing and the acting, all top notch. Plus you got Easter eggs from characters like Blue Devil and Madame Xanadu. It was such a cool show to watch. Not enough people have seen it, and it's actually really hard to see today. It's not on any streaming service that I'm aware of. If you want to see it, you actually have to buy it, like digitally.
Yeah, the series debuted on the DC Universe app back when that was a thing.
Right.
And I know that they ran the shows on the CW network that were like toned down. But I've always been interested in watching this show. I'm really upset that we didn't review at the time that it came out because we weren't doing shows back then until we quickly realized, hey, you know, DC and Marvel are actually putting out great shows on these platforms. We should start reviewing them.
Yeah, this was definitely one of the shows that inspired us to start reviewing streaming content.
And one of these days, maybe we will revisit Swamp Thing and review season 1.
I would love that. I mean, that'll be like the least listened to episode of all time because no one's going to be able to watch it, but I would still love to do it.
So great answer, Eric Jones. Congrats on winning this week's No Prize. If you, the listener, want a shot at winning your own No Prize, stay tuned to later on this episode when we'll be asking another question of the week. And now that that's done,
on to the news. Okay, so many people, especially DC fans, have been kind of confused when it comes to the new cinematic universe that James Gunn is setting up, primarily because of how the Flash movie ended. Initially, since that film was set up sort of like Flashpoint in the comics, which rebooted DC's continuity, everyone, including myself, thought that The Flash was going to lead into James Gunn's new universe. But in scheduling DC's movies for this year, Blue Beetle and Aquaman ended up coming out after The Flash. So it's always been kind of a question as to when James Gunn's DC universe is going to start. Well, we learned last Wednesday from James Gunn on Threads, right after the writer's strike ended, that DCU continuity will start with the Max animated series Creature Commandos that comes out next year. Gunn described Creature Commandos as an aperitif or an appetizer to the real meat of canon that really begins with Superman Legacy, scheduled to be released in 2025. So for a lot of fans like myself who were kind of confused by James Gunn's early statement saying that, you know, Blue Beetle was the DCU's first character, but Superman Legacy is the DCU's first film. Now we know when the DCU actually starts. We also learned from James Gunn on Threads that Xolo Maridueña, John Cena, and Viola Davis would be reprising their roles in the DCU.
The dude needs to make up his mind. Like, first he's like, oh yeah, Blue Beetle's the first DCU character. And it turns out that, yeah, that might be the case. But is it like an alternate universe version of Blue Beetle that's going to be played by the same actor? What's going on here?
I mean, technically, you could say that Viola Davis's Amanda Waller is the first DCU character since she was the first one to be cast way back when.
Right, in Suicide Squad, which came out in 2016. So this is all still confusing as hell. And James Gunn is not clearing up anything. And he kind of wrote off fan confusion as like, oh, I understand that people want to understand what's going on, but it'll all be made clear. I honestly don't think it'll all be made clear. I think fans are honestly going to have to kind of figure shit out for themselves, wherein it's determined that the DCU is just an alternate universe of the DCEU. Where basically things are pretty much the same, except, Superman is younger and looks different. And Batman too.
I don't know if I would consider this like a alternate universe of the DCEU. I don't know what to make of it, honestly. But I mean, James Gunn does tell me that it's okay to be confused on what's happening in the DCU since no one has seen anything from the DCU yet. To that, I just have to reply, well, you said that Xolo Maridueña is returning as Blue Beetle, so I mean, I feel like I have seen something from the DCU in Blue Beetle, in Peacemaker, in the Suicide Squad. I am confused. It's very confusing.
I don't think it's okay to be confused. I think confusion does not breed brand loyalty, which is really what DC needs at this point.
I think instead of saying it's okay to be confused, he should have said it's like okay to be patient. Because I don't mind being patient. I know a lot of the internet is not like everyone wants everything all at once. But yeah, I'll wait for answers. I just hope that those answers are freaking amazing. But it's hard to feel like they're going to be, considering that I sort of feel this was the worst approach to take with the new cinematic universe. Like, either continue what was there before or freaking burn it all to the ground and start from scratch. That's much more easily digestible for audiences and fans than what we're getting. Like, I feel really bad for Jason Momoa because there was not a single mention of Aquaman in James Gunn's tweets, threads, whatever you want to call them. And it kind of feeds into the naysayers that maybe the Aquaman sequel isn't too important to watch.
Man, it must suck to be a DC fan right now. I'm so glad that I'm not one of those.
I just kind of want this year to be over so that we could get the Joker sequel, because I know that's going to be good.
Yeah. Hopefully. It is a musical, so we'll see.
Oh, you're one of those people, huh? Okay. But considering the fact that James Gunn has confirmed that at least some prior actors are returning to this universe, hopefully some storylines are also making the jump. And that brings us to our question of the week. Which prior DC film or television series would you most hope remained in James Gunn's DCU continuity, and why?
And this is besides projects like Blue Beetle, Peacemaker, and the Suicide Squad, which are already confirmed by Gunn to be making that leap in transition to the DCU.
Record your answer at dynamicduel.com by clicking on the red microphone button in the bottom right-hand corner of the screen, which will prompt you to leave us a voicemail. Your message could be up to 30 seconds long, and don't forget to leave your name in case we include you on the podcast. We'll pick our favorite answer and award that person a Dynamic Duel No Prize that we'll post to Instagram and our email newsletter. Be sure to answer before October 7th.
But I think that does it for all the news for this week, so let's go ahead and get into the main event of this episode, which is going to be a spooky fun fight between the vampires of Andrew Bennett and Dracula. All right, Andrew Bennett versus Dracula. As I said before, they're both vampires. Andrew Bennett is just some guy with a random-ass name that you can meet on the sidewalk anywhere you went. He's just Andrew Bennett. Going up against fucking Dracula, who is, the lord of all vampires. He's freaking Dracula. Everybody knows who Dracula is. No one knows who Andrew Bennett is.
You know why no one knows who Andrew Bennett is?
Why?
Because he's freaking super secretive, all right? He's
That's
also
so
the Lord
lame.
of Vampires. Just, you're not supposed to know who he is because he's sneaky.
Allegedly, Andrew Bennett's series called I, Vampire has a super popular following, and Andrew Bennett is one of the most powerful and premier vampires in the DC universe. I'm calling bullshit. I'm saying show me the receipts to those statements because I am horribly naive when it comes to DC.
Oh, you're going to get those receipts and you're going to rue your words. You're going to ruin the day you ever talked about Andrew Bennett.
We're getting highly dramatic here, but vampires themselves are quite dramatic characters.
Oh, yeah. I mean, the whole story of iVampire and Andrew Bennett is full of drama. He's not a superhero character. It's very much a romantic gothic horror.
Wow, I almost fell asleep when you were explaining that.
Oh, wow.
I think this backstory is going to be super interesting. I know everybody will stay awake for the Dracula backstory, though.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure Marvel's version is so much better than Bram Stoker's Dracula. Like, what the hell does Marvel even think they're doing? Like, taking a classic character and just trying to make it their own. No,
Probably
it's
the
going to be
same thing
shit.
that
We all know
DC did with Frankenstein. Did we not do a duel between Frankenstein and Bloodstone?
Fuck you.
Exactly.
I'm not going to dignify that with a response. Let's move on to Alfred Jarvis 9000, who is going to explain the methodology behind our duels. AJ9K, tell our listeners how you go about determining a winner in our duel matchups.
Yes, of course, sir. The way I determine a winner between the contestants is by running 1,000 Monte Carlo simulations using the character's statistics. A Monte Carlo simulation is a probabilistic model used to determine outcomes through random sampling. In this case, I randomize the statistics along a normal distribution as a way to simulate the many variables that can occur during battle. The stat parameters are based on the official Marvel power grid, from which the DC character's statistics are extrapolated. Additional stat categories are included such as range, damage potential, versatility, and perception in order to create a more detailed and accurate simulation. The results of the 1,000 simulations provide a percentage of wins for each character. The contestant with the higher percentage is declared the victor, as they have a higher probability to win any given battle. In an equitable pairing, neither character should win 100% of the matches. The comic book stories have shown that there's even a way for Batman to defeat Superman, so the confidence rate of my method falls in line with the precedents that have been established in the source material. My mathematical simulations are without subjectivity or bias. Feats are not the sole consideration, nor are fan votes tabulated for determination of the winner.
Thanks, AJ9K. Before we run the simulations, though, we like to break down each character's histories and abilities before improvising a scenario on how we imagined one of the 1,000 simulations would play out beat for beat.
And it's my turn to go first with the DC character's backstory, so let me tell you all about Andrew Bennett. In 16th century England, Lord Andrew Bennett was a young English nobleman and war hero who served in the court of Queen Elizabeth, where he fell in love with one of the Queen's handmaidens, Mary Seward, who loved Andrew in return. On the eve of one of Andrew's business travels, Mary begged Andrew not to leave, as she felt that it was too dangerous for him to travel so late in the day. Laughing Mary off, Andrew embarked on his trip, and sure enough, that night, Andrew was attacked and bitten by a vampire. Though Andrew was able to kill the vampire, Andrew died as well, arising 3 days later with a thirst for blood. Distraught over his vampirism, Andrew hid, feeding on the blood of animals until he was eventually discovered in his bedroom by Mary. Realizing what he had become, Mary begged Andrew to transform her into a vampire as well, so that they could be together for eternity. Andrew reluctantly agreed and fed on Mary, killing her. When she returned from the dead, she was a vampire, though now completely changed and devoid of her prior humanity, corrupted and possessing sadistic joy in feeding on others. Mary left Andrew and developed a reputation for herself as Mary, Queen of Blood, forming a secret society known as the Cult of the Blood Red Moon with intentions of taking over the world. Horrified and guilt-stricken by what Mary had become and by her actions, Andrew dedicated his immortal life to tracking Mary across the world, knowing that he would be forced to kill his beloved Mary once again in order to save the human race. Andrew gained and lost numerous allies over the centuries in his pursuit of Mary. In the early 1900s, Andrew nearly caught her after she had just killed the parents of a young boy named Dmitry Mishkin. Andrew rescued Dmitry instead and raised him to become a formidable vampire hunter. In the late 1960s, Andrew confronted Mary at Woodstock, only for Mary to threaten the life of a beautiful young woman named Deborah Dancer. Forced to save Deborah rather than pursue Mary, Andrew confessed to Deborah his life story and mission. Deborah joined Andrew and Dmitry in their crusade to kill Mary and stop her cult, eventually encountering a vampire that turned out to be Dmitry's mother, Dunya Mishkin, to Dmitry's despair. Not long after, the trio were attacked by human agents of the Cult of the Blood Red Moon and trapped in a cave-in. Andrew nearly succumbed to his bloodlust and fed on Deborah while she was sleeping, only for her to wake up at the last minute. Andrew kissed her instead, realizing he was developing romantic feelings for someone other than Mary for the first time in hundreds of years. Andrew abandoned Deborah and Dimitri to hunt Mary on his own and protect his loved ones from further danger. After Andrew chased Mary on his own for some time, an old ally of Andrew's named Edward Thrain returned seemingly from the dead as a vampire and kidnapped Andrew and Deborah. Andrew was able to escape and save Deborah, however, making him realize how much his friends meant to him. Andrew decided to find Dimitri and, with Deborah's help, managed to follow him to Russia, only to learn that Dimitri was tracking his mother, Dunya Mishkin, and had been transformed into a vampire himself. Deborah attempted to kill Dunya, but accidentally killed Dimitri instead, who killed his mother with the last of his strength. While in Russia, Andrew discovered an experimental formula and supposed cure for vampirism, which he took, allowing him to enjoy the pleasures of being a man once again. After spending the night with Deborah, his body succumbed to rigor mortis, allowing the Cult of the Blood Red Moon to capture him as his body began to slowly decay. Mary forced Andrew to watch as she transformed Deborah into a vampire. Deborah, having taken the formula as well, emerged as a vampire without any typical vampire weaknesses, and the two women fought to the death, culminating with Deborah dragging Mary into the sunlight, where Mary burst into flames and died. Deborah returned to Andrew, who peacefully died in her arms. Decades later, Andrew's body was resurrected and now also purged of any innate vampire weaknesses. Realizing after several suicide attempts that he was incapable of death, even by standard vampire killing methods, Andrew became apathetic, now tired of living. After being sent to hell alongside other demonic heroes and villains to partake in a war between the demon Neron and Satanas, Andrew was later resurrected back on Earth by the new Cult of the Blood Red Moon, now controlled by Deborah. In post-Flashpoint continuity, Andrew's past was rewritten so that in the 16th century he was the young aristocratic son of a British lord. Mary was now a servant girl who worked in the Bennett estate, and she and Andrew fell in love. Andrew's father, however, disapproved of their relationship as he felt Mary's social class made her unfit for marriage to his son. Upon learning this, that same night, the heartbroken Andrew fled from his home during a storm, during which his coach was damaged and his coachman was killed in the accident. Emerging from the wreckage, Andrew encountered the biblical Cain, who shared his story of how he was forced to wander the earth after killing his brother Abel, cursed by God with vampirism. Cain eventually found a woman, Lilith, Adam's first wife, who had been cast out of Eden prior to Eve's creation. Dying from starvation, Cain fed on Lilith, drinking her blood and killing her, only for her to return to life, now sharing in Cain's curse. Cain and Lilith became lovers and had many children who terrorized the planet. Eventually, Cain and his family were attacked by Estergard the demon and other sorcerers in an attempt to steal his power. Cain survived, but Lilith and their family did not. And a new curse was placed upon Cain that if he ever fed on an innocent soul, he would be imprisoned for eternity. Smelling the love for Mary within Andrew and confusing it for lust, Cain attacked him, only to realize upon biting him that Andrew was indeed innocent. Cain's spirit was sucked into Andrew's body, which became a prison known as a demon lock. Cursed with vampirism, Andrew was afraid to return home in fear of harming Mary or his family, leaving Mary to feel abandoned while forced to submit to the sexual abuse of Andrew's father. After gaining control over his bloodlust by feeding on animal blood, Andrew returned home after a year with the intention of making Mary his eternal bride. Mary agreed, and after being turned, she admitted her disdain for him, promising to use her new power to get revenge on him and all who wronged her, leaving Andrew to find that she had murdered his father just before Andrew had returned. After decades of attempting to stop Mary's war on humanity, Andrew and Mary came to a truce that lasted for centuries up until the present day. After a romantic night together, Mary sent hundreds of vampires to attack Andrew, forcing him to kill all of them and to be labeled a traitor, ending their truce. With help from a vampire hunter named Professor John Trefton, a young female vampire named Tig Rafelson, John Constantine, and Batman, the latter two of whom you can learn more about in the respective Duel episodes, Andrew tracked Mary to Gotham City, where Batman stopped Andrew from killing Mary, only for Andrew to then be beheaded by Tig, who thought that by killing Andrew, Mary would also die. From Andrew's body, the spirit of Cain re-emerged after centuries, who then summoned all vampires to Gotham City. While the Justice League Dark protected Gotham citizens, Constantine and Deadman traveled to the afterlife and found Andrew. You can learn more about the Justice League Dark in their Team Duel episode against the Midnight Suns. With help from Madame Xanadu, Andrew returned to the world of the living, tethered to Cain's power, and now his equal. After executing Cain and absorbing his full power, Andrew gained full control over all vampires, including Mary, and was able to erase the memory of vampires from everyone in the city. After helping the Justice League Dark obtain a map to the Books of Magic, Andrew resettled all vampires on a compound in Utah. After an army of vampire hunters, known as the Order of Van Helsings, learned about the compound, they attacked and killed 60% of the vampires there, while also unleashing evil magic that turned dead vampires into uncontrollable zombie vampires. Realizing that he could contain his magic using his body as a demon lock, the same way that he contained Cain's spirit, Andrew absorbed the evil magic and all vampires' souls, curing the remaining vampires on the planet of their vampirism, including Mary, and turning himself evil in the process. After turning Tig back into a vampire and taking her as his queen, Andrew attempted to destroy creation by merging heaven and hell. Tig betrayed him, however, decapitating Mary and promising to kill Andrew as well. With Cain emerging from a portal to hell, he pulled all of the vampire souls from Andrew in an effort to find his ancient bride, Lilith, whose spirit he projected into Tig. Purged from the evil influence of the vampire souls, Andrew stopped his own plan to destroy creation with the help of Mary's spirit, now an agent of God. With help from the fallen angel Lucifer, Andrew and Mary managed to defeat Cain and Lilith by trapping them in the House of Mystery and Hell. With her mission complete, Mary gave Andrew a loving goodbye before departing the mortal plane. Andrew remained, known to all now as the Lord of Vampires, charged with keeping the vampire population in check in order to maintain peace with humanity. Powers-wise, Andrew Bennett is the planet's most powerful vampire, imbued with the power of the very first vampire, Cain. Andrew has enhanced superhuman senses and physicality, in addition to regeneration and mental powers, including telekinesis, clairvoyance, and hypnosis. Andrew is also able to transform his body into other forms, including a wolf, a bat, or a half-man hybrid of either of those, allowing him to grow wings or fangs if needed. He could also transform into a swarm of bats or rats, or a mist that grants him intangibility. In post-Flashpoint vampire lore, vampires do not die from sunlight exposure, but are merely weakened and robbed of any supernatural abilities. Andrew himself is not vulnerable to many typical vampire weaknesses, though he can be affected by holy magic-imbued artifacts or elements. He's also capable of conjuring various weapons, often bladed, such as swords, daggers, and even wooden stakes. And that's Andrew Bennett.
I still can't get over why he's called Andrew Bennett. Why don't they just call him Dracula if he's the Lord of the Vampires?
Because there was a real Dracula, like Vlad Dracul II or something like that. I think that was his name.
Yeah.
He's not that character.
Well, does Dracula exist in the DC universe?
I'm sure he does. I don't think I've come across him, but, he's not a part of Andrew Bennett's story. Why does the name Andrew Bennett offend you?
Because it's lame. Apologies to any actual Andrew Bennetts that are out there, which I'm sure there are at least several dozen listening to this right now, because it's a common ass fucking name and certainly does not belong as the name of a vampire.
Okay. Vampire name expert over here. Holy shit.
That was a pretty good backstory. Of course, it can't compete with the one and only Dracula, so let me go ahead and get into that. Vlad Tepes Dracula was born in 1430 in Schlossberg, Transylvania, in what would later become present-day Romania. His father, Vlad Dracul, was a noble lord who was named Prince of Wallachia by the Holy Roman Emperor Sigismund II. As a young adult, Vlad Tepes Dracula was named the new Prince of Wallachia when his father was murdered by his most trusted advisors, and he quickly developed a ruthless reputation when he sentenced all those involved to death by impalement. Vlad waged a bloodthirsty campaign in a war against the Ottoman Empire, but was mortally wounded on the battlefield by En-Sabah Nur, an ancient mutant who later became known as Apocalypse, that you can learn more about in his duel against Black Adam. Vlad was taken to a Romani healer named Leonda, who was ordered to use her magic to prevent him from dying. Unbeknownst to Vlad, however, Leonda was a vampire, guided by the ancient commands of the very first vampire, Varney, who knew of Vlad's vicious nature. Leonda bit Vlad, drinking his blood until his human form perished and he was reborn in darkness, becoming Varney's successor as the Lord of Vampires. From Castle Dracula in Transylvania, Vlad, now known as Dracula, turned a bevy of women into his vampire brides and spawned a number of children, almost all of whom would grow to hate him. His brutality spread across Europe, leading to numerous assassination attempts, all of which failed and grew his evil reputation. At one point, a man named Hans Van Helsing died in his efforts to kill Dracula, and his wife, Rachel, swore that the Van Helsing line would not rest until Dracula was destroyed. Nearly a century later, the first man to ever successfully kill Dracula was a Puritan vanquisher of evil named Solomon Kane, who staked the vampire through the heart with an ornate cross, turning him into an ancient skeleton. Shortly after, however, a band of thieves raided the castle and removed the valuable cross from Dracula's heart, which revived him. Dracula later learned of a dark magic book known as the Darkhold, and a spell within it called the Montesi Formula, which was capable of destroying all vampires. Though Dracula tried to retrieve the tome from the Vatican, a sorcerer named Cogliostro managed to steal it first. In revenge, Dracula turned the sorcerer's wife, adding her to his collection of brides. In the late 19th century, Dracula summoned an estate agent named Jonathan Harker to his castle to discuss purchasing land in England, and he became obsessed with an image of Jonathan Harker's wife, named Mina Murray. Holding Harker captive with his brides, Dracula traveled to England where he turned Mina Murray's friend Lucy and began to seduce her. Jonathan Harker managed to escape the castle, however, and with the help of Abraham Van Helsing, they staked and beheaded Dracula, seemingly killing him for good. Though Dracula survived due to Harker's and Van Helsing's blades not being made out of silver or wood. The events involving Mina Murray and Jonathan Harker were later adapted into a book by novelist Bram Stoker. As revenge against England for this repulsion, Dracula turned a British noble named John Falsworth into a vampire and set him loose in Britain around the time of World War I, dubbing his latest minion as Baron Blood, who would go on to become a recurring villain for many of Marvel's heroes. During World War II, Dracula returned to his castle to find it occupied by Nazi soldiers, and he turned the commander, forcing him to kill his own troops. In modern times, Dracula fought and killed one of the most prolific vampire hunters of the late 20th century, a man named Jamal Afari. Because of this, Afari's pupil, named Blade, swore vengeance against the Lord of Vampires. Teaming up with other vampire hunters, Blade and the group managed to stake Dracula through the heart, killing him, though Blade was the only survivor. You can learn more about Blade in his duel against Azrael. A descendant of Dracula's, a man by the name of Frank Drake, inherited Castle Dracula, and in his inspection of the castle, came across Dracula's coffin containing his staked skeleton. Frank Drake removed the stake, unknowing what it was, and in doing so revived Dracula. Ashamed by his actions, Frank Drake used his wealth to finance other vampire hunters, teaming up with the likes of Blade, a vampire named Hannibal King, Quincy Harker, who was the son of Mina Murray and Jonathan Harker, and the descendant of Abraham Van Helsing named Rachel Van Helsing. Many of these hunters would go on to form the vampire hunting group known as the Night Stalkers, under the direction of the hero sorcerer Doctor Strange. Eventually, Doctor Strange himself would cast the Darkhold spell of the Montesi Formula, eradicating Dracula and all vampires on Earth. For a long time, Dracula, it seemed, was finally and fully dead. But many years later, an elder demon of hell named Asmodeus drew upon Dracula's spirit and reconstructed his body in Castle Dracula using the souls of 666 victims. Dracula would go on to work alongside the monster hunter Elsa Bloodstone against a clan of vampire-like creatures called the Nosferati, who had plotted to infect Dracula and all vampires with a virus that would turn them into a blood supply for the creatures. Not long after, one of Dracula's sons, named Xerus, staged a coup to usurp the Lord of Vampires title by uniting the Nosferati, the Atlantean, and the Charniputra vampire sects against his father. Xerus staked Dracula, decapitating him, and had the various sects distribute his remains so as not to be joined again. Under Xerus' rule, the vampires waged war on humans and mutants alike, going to battle with the X-Men. Although Xerus managed to bite and turn the former mutant hero Jubilee, the X-Men managed to resurrect Dracula, who in turn ripped his son Xerus' head off. To save Jubilee from Dracula's hold over her, Wolverine traveled to Castle Dracula, where he teamed up with the supernatural fighting force called the Howling Commandos. Although Wolverine managed to decapitate Dracula and have his head launched into the sun, Dracula's head eventually grew back since the killing was not ceremoniously performed with wood or silver. Determining he would start his vampire nation anew, Dracula ordered the genocide of his own kind in order to weed out the weak. Then, in revenge against Wolverine, Dracula lured him to Paris, where his vampire soldiers stole a sample of his blood, which was then transferred into Dracula, where the healing effects made him now able to survive in sunlight. And that's Dracula's backstory. Powers-wise, Dracula is the most powerful vampire in existence as the Lord of Vampires. He has a wide array of abilities ranging from the physical, to the psychic, to the mystical. First off, he has razor-sharp fangs that can transfer the curse of vampirism to his victims upon biting them. He also has razor-sharp claws, as well as enhanced strength, able to lift around 4 tons, enhanced speed, agility, and senses, including a mystical sense. He is immortal, unaging, with a regenerative healing factor, capable of repairing all but a very specifically administered set of wounds, and he can even resurrect under proper conditions, such as placing his ashes in a coffin filled with soil from his homeland, being touched by the tears of a virgin, or by removing the stake if he is staked through the heart. Dracula has psionic abilities able to mentally control not just other vampires, but other people via hypnosis through eye contact. He can mentally control the weather, on par with heroes such as Storm or Thor, and he can summon or shapeshift his form into a mist, a collective of bats, a pack of rats, a clutter of spiders, a pack of wolves, or turn into a larger humanoid wolf or bat-like form. Dracula is a powerful dark magician and able to cast spells such as summoning golems or undead vampires or zombies around him. He's an adept strategist with centuries of experience and knowledge, and is an expert swordsman, and he often carries a sword with him, a long blade with serrated edges. Weakness-wise, Dracula has a lot. He is repelled by crosses and other religious icons and locations, such as churches. Holy water burns him. He is especially vulnerable to silver and wood weapons, such as stakes, spears, or bullets. He dies if he's staked through the heart, though he comes back if the stake is removed. Garlic and wolfsbane are also effective at repelling him. He does have to make contact with his native Transylvanian soil once a day, and he has to consume blood to maintain his strength, or he'll become weak with thirst. He used to be weak to sunlight, as I mentioned, but since acquiring Wolverine's healing factor, that is no longer an issue. And that's Dracula.
So essentially, these characters are pretty much the same, except Dracula has more weaknesses.
Except Dracula has a better name.
But yeah, I mean, if I had to put my money on who's a more badass vampire between Kane and Dracula, I'd put my money on Kane. And Andrew Bennett.
Too bad this fight isn't with Kane, so who gives a shit?
But, like, Andrew Bennett is essentially Kane's successor, you know?
Who cares? Dracula is Varney's successor. Big deal.
Yeah, but, like, Dracula was turned into a vampire by some peasant woman, whereas Andrew Bennett was transformed by the vampire of all vampires.
Yeah, after the Flashpoint. And we all know that retcon was retconned, because DC don't do continuity well.
For all we know, the vampire that bit Andrew Bennett pre-Flashpoint was also Kane. So...
You don't know.
You don't know either.
And now that we got their histories and abilities out of the way, let's speculate on how one of the 1,000 simulated matches will go. The winner is determined by simulations, not the speculation, but it's fun to imagine how the fight could play out. Alfred Jarvis 9000, what are the rules of our speculation?
Well, I should say there are no rules, other than the characters have no prior knowledge of the other going into the fight. All they are aware of starting out is that the other character is a threat that needs to be eliminated. For the speculation, the contestants will begin approximately 50 meters apart in a nondescript environment that will have no bearing on the match itself, as no environmental statistics are considered in my simulations. The contestants must earn victory on their own merit.
All right then, let's get into it. Andrew Bennett and Dracula meet on the battlefield. Who goes first?
I'm just going to say ain't no way Dracula is going to let some lame ass named Andrew Bennett go first.
I hope someone actually named Andrew Bennett finds you on the street and just beats your ass.
I mean, it's a good name. It's not good for a vampire. So Dracula goes first, the Lord of the Vampires. He's going to start off he's going to raise his sword up, and he's going to summon a cloak of dark clouds that just cover the entire sky with some flashes of lightning, but everything's dark. And then Dracula's going to transform, just bursting into this flock of bats that just disappear into the darkness surrounding him.
Okay, well, I mean, Andrew definitely knows now that he's up against a vampire, clearly. So
Hell yeah, he does.
Gonna conjure up a pair of wooden stakes in his hands. And, he's just gonna peer into that darkness and grow a pair of giant bat wings. And he's just gonna take to the air to stake those bats.
Okay, so the bats are swirling around, flying through the air, and old Andy's trying to stake them. But all of a sudden, in this shadowy blur, Dracula is going to emerge from the flock of bats midair, and he's going to use his sword to just slice those wooden stakes in half. And then just as quickly, Dracula is going to become a flock of bats again, flying into the clouds above Mr. Bennett, and he's going to send down a lightning bolt that knocks him out of the sky.
That's Lord Bennett to you, punk ass. Before the lightning strikes, I'm going to say that Andrew transforms into a mist that makes him intangible to that lightning bolt. After which, he's just going to float up into the dark clouds, and he's just going to let those bats fly right into his mist form. At which point, Andrew's going to transform into a pack of rats that attack the bats midair and cause them to crash down to the ground. So it's just raining bats and rats like a horrible plague or something.
Well, as each bat hits the ground, it's going to burst into this small cloud of black mist. And the mist is going to all gather together and reform into the form of Dracula. At which point Dracula is going to raise his hand and summon a horde of zombies all around him across the environment. And those zombies are just going to beat the shit out of these rats.
Damn. Jeez. Except that the rats, they're going to group together and reform into Andrew. Now in this terrifying werewolf form, right? And he straight up just rips right through these slow ass zombies, slashing a path right to Dracula, whose head he just tears right the hell off.
You mean he tries to tear off Dracula's head, but Dracula is just gonna stand there staring at him, smiling with his eyes glowing red, and Andre Benson, he's gonna be frozen in place under Dracula's hypnotic control.
I mean, that's not gonna work on a vampire as powerful as Andrew Bennett. So that smile turns upside down real quick.
What? Why won't this work?
Dude, would you say that Andrew Bennett could hypnotize Dracula?
Fuck no!
Exactly.
You say that, but Dracula was able to exert some influence against even the Queen of Monsters in the Marvel Comics. So Dracula may not be able to control Anders' mind, but he at least forces him to revert into his humanoid form, mid-slash as he tries to take off his head. So instead of decapitating Dracula, Mr. Beckett just slaps him. And that was a mistake, because Dracula is going to grab him by the wrist and twist it, causing Anton to flip onto his back on the ground, where Dracula just stakes him through the heart with his sword.
Boom, telekinetic shield. That sword just bounces right off of it. And Andrew Bennett, he's going to follow up with a telekinetic blast from the ground that's just going to send Dracula on his ass. At which point, Andrew gets on his feet, and in this wicked fast flurry, he's going to pin Dracula's hands and feet to the ground with silver daggers, like crucifixion style. And while Dracula is like writhing in pain, Andrew's just going to look down on him with like another silver dagger in his hand. And he's going to be like, "My name is Andrew Bennett, bitch," before staking him right through the heart and killing him.
Okay, Dracula is in pain from the silver daggers in his hands and feet, but right as Drew Barrymore tries to stake him in the heart, the silver dagger just goes through a cluster of spiders, because Dracula turns into spiders, and these spiders crawl up and around Mr. Bentley's arm and into his mouth, when suddenly a sword erupts from out of his chest, slicing up and around as Dracula emerges from inside Ashton's now sliced in half body.
Andrew Bennett. It's Andrew Bennett. It's
not worth remembering. He's dead.
Jeez. Dude, I'm pretty sure Dracula wouldn't be able to use his powers if he was positioned in the shape of a cruciform with silver in his body.
Well, what do you know? You don't know.
Dude, I know what you told me.
Yeah, but it's like, it's fiction. So.
Oh my gosh.
Let's go ahead and leave the match there. Either Andrew Bennett stakes Dracula to the ground in the shape of a cross and then stakes his heart, or Dracula turns into spiders, goes into Andrew Bennett's body, and stakes him through the heart from the inside while cutting his body in half. Pretty violent, but they're vampires, so it makes sense.
All right, let's enter the stats and find out who's going to come out on top. AG9K, hit it.
Inputting data, running calculations, processing results. Simulations complete.
All right, that was pretty fun. Despite having a horrible name, I will say that Andrew Bennett came out almost identical to Dracula.
Yeah, their stats are fairly close, in terms of movement speed, evasiveness, strength, even fighting skill and range. They're pretty much equal.
We did say that Dracula was less durable than Andrew Bennett because Dracula has more weaknesses. Although he did overcome his weakness to sunlight, he's still affected by a lot more things than Andrew Bennett's character.
Plus, Andrew Bennett is able to produce some of those weaknesses, just conjure them in his hands. So Dracula lost a point in durability for that reason as well. When it came to intelligence, we did say that Dracula was smarter, not only because he lived longer, but also he has more experience as a leader of vampires than Andrew. Perception-wise, though, we gave Andrew the edge because he is clairvoyant. Versatility-wise, both of these guys are highly versatile as the lord of the vampires of their respective universes. They do a bunch of stuff.
Yeah, I totally thought Dracula would have Andrew Bennett in the versatility department, considering all the different powers that he has. But unfortunately, Andrew Bennett can do just as much, pretty much. The real difference we found there was that Dracula is able to control the weather, whereas Andrew Bennett has telekinetic abilities.
And can summon weapons.
Yeah.
So taking all of these stats into consideration, Joseph, who do you think came out on top?
Not some loser like Andrew Bennett. I would hate to give the win to Andrew Bennett. Fucking Dracula. It's a vampire match. Of course, Dracula. And our Instagram poll takers agree with me.
Of course they do.
Largely probably because they don't have no fucking clue who Andrew Bennett is. 80% of them think that Dracula is going to take this.
Yeah, but I mean, by the time we figured out what duel we were doing for this episode, because we weren't sure, it was kind of a last minute decision, this poll has not been up for 24 hours yet. So there's still time for people to vote for Andrew Bennett. Like, you never know. Andrew Bennett could take the win in this poll.
He's not gonna. He's just some random dude.
He's cool, I swear. You guys heard it. You know he's cool now. But let's find out who won. AJ9K, the results, please.
Here you are, sir.
All right, the winner of the duel matchup between Andrew Bennett and Dracula is Dracula.
Of course it is.
But barely, by 53.2% or 532 of the 1,000 matches. Andrew Bennett won 468.
Of course he would lose. He's literally nobody.
One of these days, I hope they make a comic book character named Joseph Garcia, so I can talk about what a fucking loser that character is and how lame they are just because their name is Joseph Garcia. All comic book characters have to have a name. Why is Andrew Bennett, apparently the worst one? Is it any worse than Steve Rogers?
No, but Steve Rogers is also Captain America. Andrew Bennett is a tax accountant that works down the street at the H&R Block in the local shopping center. Not the freaking Lord of Vampires like Dracula, let me tell you that.
There's going to be an Andrew Bennett who actually works at an H&R Block listening to this episode. He's just like, oh, I feel seen.
We do see you, Andrew. We see you.
Yeah, Andrew, and you're a badass. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. You have a badass name. You're a fucking vampire. Lord of the Vampires.
But that does it for this duel, guys. Let us know what you thought about the results by writing to us at dynamicduelpodcast@gmail.com or by visiting us on Instagram or X. You can find links to all of our accounts by checking out our show notes or visiting our website at dynamicduel.com.
And on our site, you could also find a link to our Patreon page, where you can join our Dynamic 2O tier and chat with us and fellow listeners, our Fantastic 4 tier, which gets you bonus content each month, our X-Force tier that makes you an executive producer of this podcast, or our newest tier that lets you join our Dynamike Podcast Network. If you can't join Patreon, you could still support the show by signing up for our e-newsletter, also at dynamicduel.com, so you'll never miss an episode.
Or you could also rate the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Podchaser, or on our website. Now that we got the calendar for October all figured out, we know that our next episode next week is going to be a review tying into this episode. We're going to discuss the 2004 film Blade Trinity. We've already talked about the first Blade and Blade 2, so this will round out the trilogy by talking about this shit show of a film. Oh my god, it's so bad.
Yeah, Dracula's in the movie, and he sucks. So at the end of the day, Marvel's Dracula really is a big fucking loser. That does it for this episode. We want to give a big thanks to our executive producers, Ken Johnson,
John Starosky,
Zachary Hepburn,
Dustyn Balcom,
Miggy Matanguihan,
Brandon Estergard,
Nathaniel Wagner,
Levi Yeaton,
Nick Abanto,
Austin Wesolowski,
AJ Dunkerley,
Scott Camacho,
Adam Speas,
and Andrew Shunk for helping make this podcast possible. And we'll talk to you guys next week.
up, and away!
True believers.
Vampires are a pain in the neck.